In our company of former Boy Scouts, there was always a sense of unity, especially when planning trips into the wild. We had extensive experience, and things usually went smoothly. But, as it turned out, our old mentors hadn't prepared us for one thing. We were trained to watch out for wild animals, poisonous plants, and venomous spiders, but no one ever told us that even in the deepest woods, you could still run into other people. Over the years, I've gathered plenty of stories about encountering strangers in the wilderness, and well, some are funny. Two I want to share are truly disturbing. Story 1. Greetings from the Subaru Lumberjack. The first encounter took place in Florida in early January. Two buddies and I booked a cheap, primitive campsite for the weekend. Upon arrival, we immediately realized that solitude was out of the question. Our spot was right next to a dirt road, just a couple of miles from a highway. There were dozens of empty spots lined up along the path, but a little further down was a family that looked like they were practically living there. Right across the road from us, however, a lone man had set up camp in his Subaru. He didn't say anything as we set up, but all three of us noted that he was watching us closely. Not only that, he had a large machete holstered to his hip. Based on his demeanor, we figured he was some kind of societal outcast who chose isolation in the woods for his own comfort, and perhaps the safety of others. The entire first day, he kept his distance, only about 30 feet from the edge of our campsite to his. We had to accept that he would likely be listening to us all night. Fortunately, the first night went fine. On the second day, he seemed to warm up a bit. A buddy and I ventured into the brush to gather firewood, and he approached to suggest where we could find drier material. We thanked him, but decided against taking his advice. He was acting too suspicious. He stuttered, drooled, and nervously fiddled with the machete's hilt, as if terrified of us. He was clearly completely unadjusted to being around people. Nevertheless, after his attempt to help, we relaxed a little. At worst, he'd be an entertaining neighbor, and since we outnumbered him 3-1, we didn't feel threatened. As the day wound down, there was an unexpected development. First one car, then two, then 3, 4, 5, and finally 5 purebred millennials from the city booked 3 sites right next to the Machete Man's camp. Unfortunately, they had unwittingly encroached upon the personal space of the forest hermit. Compared to the death glare he was giving them, the way he spied on us looked tame. He tried to act normal, but his body was clearly tensing up as he stared. The situation escalated when a dog showed up. The owners of one of the 2 dogs let their animal roam off-leash. Within minutes, the little dog ran over to our neighbor's site and, in typical puppy excitement, started jumping on him. We heard the Machete Man literally bark back at the dog. The man was frozen stiff. It looked like he was using all his power to keep from drawing his blade and chopping the dog's head off right then and there. The owner quickly ran over and contained the pet. That's when we heard the alarming phrase, "Next time that damn dog comes over here, I'm gonna shoot it." He clearly wanted to convey to the city folk that they didn't own the place, but surprisingly, they were unfazed. They leashed the dog, but as night fell, the guests became even more intrusive. The dog barked incessantly, and the 10 or so people shouted over each other so loudly that we could hear every single word. We spent the entire night quietly mocking their ridiculous, out-of-touch conversations. My friend even came up with a great impression of the most obnoxious one. When our fire died down, we crawled into our hammocks. It was chilly for Floridian standards, so when I woke at daybreak, I closed my eyes to sleep in. When I next opened them, I saw that same friend crouched by the fire pit trying to get the coals going. I decided to stay put until the fire was lit. But soon I heard voices. My eyes snapped open when I realized one of them belonged to the Machete Man. He was standing over my friend, having walked well into our campsite, his hand resting on the hilt as usual. Pretending to sleep, I listened in. "Which one of you was doing that dumbass voice?" he asked. My friend stammered and replied, "That was me." A brief silence followed, making me choke up. I expected the worst, but thankfully that's not what happened. Instead, he laughed awkwardly. "Man, you guys had me rolling in my tent last night." My friend audibly sighed of relief. "Yeah, cool, man. We thought it was pretty funny." That's when the Machete Man leaned in and muttered, "I'm serious, guys. I was this close. If you guys hadn't made me laugh like that last night, I was about 10 seconds away from taking out the 9mm and making him shut up." My friend, understandably, couldn't respond. The man kept talking. "I hate when those damn city people come out here. They ought to stay in Orlando. You guys aren't from there, are you?" No, we're not from Orlando. We're from the Gainesville area." "Ah, that's not too bad. Well, anyway, I'm going to go back and try to get him to leave. See y'all later." Finally, he turned and walked back to his campsite. Once he was out of earshot, my friend looked at me, he'd noticed my open eyes, and asked, "Did you hear that?" "Yeah, man. Good thing we're leaving today, right?" Our third friend woke up then. After we filled him in, we unanimously agreed to call off the trip a few hours early. We quickly ate breakfast and packed everything up, leaving well before 10 o'clock. We tried to play it off as a joke, but even in the humor there was a seriousness we wanted to avoid. I don't remember who said it, but the phrase landed, "What if we get home and see on the news that some guy shot up a whole campsite full of people from Orlando?" Thankfully, that never happened, but as we left, it truly felt like we were abandoning those people to their fate. I still think about what might have happened had we not brought a sense of humor to that situation. We were definitely caught off guard, and I don't know how else we could have handled it. No one expects to be crowded when they go primitive camping, but unfortunately this was not our last experience with woodland hermits. Story 2. The Mountain Man Observer. The second time I encountered a person unexpectedly in the woods, it could have gone much worse. I was camping with the same two guys, plus a fourth friend who wasn't a scout. This was a more serious trip. We drove to South Carolina for 4 nights and 5 days. This time we had a very secluded spot. After miles down a dirt road, it ended in a loop. We parked and hiked downhill to a campsite on the upper bank of a river. It was hot and dry, so the river was shallow, mostly ankle deep. The terrain was mountainous, which delighted us Floridians. We brought fishing gear, planning to explore the river. As a beginner, I had no luck for a while, unlike my friends. By the third day, we were getting on each other's nerves, and someone suggested driving to the Sliding Rock in nearby North Carolina. I wasn't keen, but the others were excited. And here we made a pretty stupid mistake. Boy Scouts teach the buddy system, never go out alone. But we got complacent. The 3 of them went for their half-day trip, and I stayed behind to watch the camp. It was actually relaxing. I cooked lunch, read, washed the pot in the river, and cast my line. That's how I caught my first ever fish, a small catfish that came to eat my grits. After taking a photo and releasing it, I felt lucky and ventured downriver to try again. About a quarter mile down, I caught a baby smallmouth bass. Since the water was so shallow, everyone was only catching small fry. After releasing that one, I decided to rest, sitting on a rock in the gentle rapids. I was enjoying the scenery when the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I realized I was completely alone, hundreds of miles from home in unfamiliar Appalachian territory. Suddenly, a twig snapped in the steep woods on the riverbank to my right. I stood up quickly, looking for movement. Nothing. But when I looked down, I noticed my legs and groin were covered in dozens of tiny leeches. I freaked out, frantically picking them off. When I felt I got them all, I hightailed it back to camp. On the way, jumping onto the bank, my bare foot landed on a small cypress knee, bruising my arch badly. I was starting to get concerned for my safety, feeling like I'd stepped too far out of my comfort zone. I arrived safely back at camp. Still alone and worried about leeches, I stripped down to nothing and used the only mirror we had to check myself thoroughly. Once I was sure there were no stragglers, I got dressed, lay in my hammock with a beer and a cigarette, and waited for my friends. A little while later, they returned, and we recounted our separate experiences. Soon after, we decided that my non-scout friend and I should return to the car to charge our phones. We were gone for about 45 minutes. When we hiked back into camp, we saw him. He was standing in the river right by camp, talking to our other two friends. I could tell by their stance that they were on edge and had taken a defensive posture, waiting for us to return so they could outnumber whoever this was. He was geared up like he lived out of his backpack, a true mountain man. I never got close enough to hear what he was saying, and he was nearly intelligible anyway due to his missing teeth. My friends told me everything they could understand. The guy's name was Bo. He claimed to own this entire region of mountains. Graciously, he allowed us to stay with his permission, as long as we remained respectful. Then he looked over and told my friend that he had seen me in the river earlier, and was about to come talk to me until I got spooked and ran off. That's when I realized he must have been watching me the entire time, or at least a lot of it. He probably watched me strip naked, too. Regardless, the way he had creeped up on our campsite was suspicious. He seemed a little delusional and unpredictable. I'm immensely grateful that he didn't approach me when I was alone. Things could have gone much differently if he felt like he had a chance at overpowering just one or two of us for supplies. He was most definitely armed. He had that confidence about him. My friends who spoke to him said they were very uncomfortable with how he was slowly stepping closer to our camp until the rest of us returned. Then he finally backed off. That was a telltale sign that he might not have had the best intentions in mind. Eventually we got him to leave, but we never quite trusted that he wasn't lurking in the mountains all around us, watching us, waiting for a chance or an excuse to start playing a banjo and summon a Native American cryptid or just straight up shoot us, since there was no way anyone else would be around to hear it for miles and miles. For the rest of our time there, we traded off shifts for night watch in case Bo came back. He never did, but I'll tell you, the blood-curdling shriek of an owl is not something you want to hear in the middle of a night like that. Story 3. The Echo Man. I took a break from camping for a couple of years, but recently went on my first trip in a while. There were 4 of us. I brought some of the friends who had gone with me before, and one brought their new fiancée. I booked a familiar campsite, but in the time I was away, it had changed. The trees were healthier, the shrubs were thicker, and the foot trails that used to snake through the woods were completely overgrown. People must have forgotten about that area during the lockdowns, and the forest moved in to take it back. However, my fellow campers were not appreciative. In the past, we all respected the woods, but this time they were acting differently. I don't blame them. The last few years have been tough, and it's good to let loose, but it's always crucial to remember that you're a guest in nature's domain. As soon as we set up, all my friends started acting like college kids, snapping branches because they were supposedly in the way, drinking excessive amounts of beer and throwing the empty cans into the woods, and even spreading hot coals from the fire pit into the rest of the campsite just to play with the fire. They were literally breaking every possible rule. I got upset and told them to cut it out, but they more or less just shoved a beer in my hand and told me to chill. I tried to enjoy my time, but as the evening wore down, so did I. While everyone else sat around the fire, I turned in early. I was restless and in a bad mood, and they were all talking extremely loudly, yelling about nonsense. I didn't check the time, but I know it was late when they finally called it a night. It was like the whole forest took a breath when they finally shut up and passed out. I lay there listening to the bugs for a while, long enough to be the only person left awake. Then I got up to pee one last time. I crawled out and walked to the tree line around the campsite. Naturally, my eyes drifted into the darkness of the woods. Looking up, I could see the crescent moon peeking through the canopy. Looking forward, it was all trees and shadows, until I saw something else. A pair of eyes looking straight at me, almost glowing white. I immediately jumped in surprise and covered myself up, looking away for a mere split second. Looking back, the eyes had moved closer, close enough to make out the tiniest detail in the moonlight. It was a person, or at least it seemed like one, just standing out in the open. There was something bone-chilling about them. I knew I had to call out, but I was nearly too afraid to speak. "Hey, who's there?" When they didn't respond, I thought to shine my flashlight on them. I fumbled through my pocket for the small one I'd taken out, looking away for a single second before clicking it on. Of course, they had moved again, a full 10 feet or so, and now there were only 30 feet between us. I cursed in fear, but with some light on them, more details came into focus. I was in disbelief at first, but I was looking right at my friend's fiancée. She was in the same clothes, looking exactly as she normally did, except for the unusually reflective whites of her eyes and the way she was standing, like she was being held up by strings. "Haley!" I called out to her. "What are you doing?" There was a brief pause. Then, at last, they said something, but I was taken aback by what I heard. "What are you doing?" It copied not only my words, but my voice, too. It sounded exactly like me, but Haley wasn't an impressionist. Confused, I took a step back, and without hesitation, they took a step forward, matching my movement exactly. I stopped backpedaling when I noticed this, and tried to squint for a better look. That's when I had the hopeful thought that maybe she was sick or something. Otherwise, if I wasn't looking at Haley, I didn't know what I was looking at. "Haley, it's late. You shouldn't be out of your tent like that. Are you feeling all right? Do you need any help?" Again, she didn't reply in her own voice, but in mine. "You shouldn't be out of your tent like that." A chill ran down my spine. Suddenly, I knew whatever was going on, I wasn't equipped to handle it alone. I walked backward toward the tents, keeping an eye on Haley as they followed me step for step, almost gliding through the air like a marionette. When I got to my friend's tent, Haley was past the tree line and standing in the clearing. I started rapping on the canvas and yelling for her fiancé to wake up. "Steven, get up! We gotta help Haley! Come on, man, get your butt up!" The flap unzipped, and Steven peeked his head out, confused and annoyed. "What are you talking about, man? Haley's fine, dude. She's right here." He pulled back the tent flap and showed me inside his tent, where I shined my light and I saw Haley in her sleeping bag, just standing there.